chapter 6, text 1. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the Eightfold Yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the Eightfold Yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of karma yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self-satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the Supreme Whole and not for personal satisfaction is the perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform Agni Hotra Yagyas, fire sacrifices. But actually they are self-interested because their goal is becoming one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Similarly, the mystic yogi who practices the yoga system with half-open eyes, ceasing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole without self-interest. A Krishna-conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is the perfect sannyasi or perfect yogi. Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way: Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitang va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani, janmanishvare, bhavatad bhaktir ahaituki tvai. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want only is the causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasanyasi cha yogi cha naniragnir na chakriyaha. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the Supreme. He is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. What's going on here in Bhagavad Gita? Arjuna is bewildered about his duty. This involves discussion of varnashram, because Arjuna considered his duty to fight was his duty as a Kshatriya. And Krishna ultimately brings Arjuna to a higher platform and shows him that his real duty is beyond that of varnashram, that his duty is to surrender to Krishna. So this is all on the platform of Dharma. What's going on over there? It's all going on the platform of Dharma. Dharma means duty. It's the interface of worldly duty with higher duty. Acting in this world, on this platform, understanding that this world is not all in all. We have a higher duty. Sometimes we see some concept like this is there they have these courts for prosecuting war criminals. So they performed their duty they were fighting and performing their duty for their nation. But after the war was over, they were arrested and punished. The Nazis were tried. There were Nuremberg trials, and they would defend themselves, saying, "Well, I was just following orders. I was just performing my duty. That's all. Don't blame me. I did my duty. We were fighting, and I was given orders to kill so many people." But that was not accepted in the court. It was said that in that circumstance you should have disobeyed the order. How can a soldier disobey his orders? But they were told that, no, you should have disobeyed those orders because there is a higher principle. That who was giving you orders was wrong, was morally wrong. So, of course, without understanding the Vedic knowledge, what is actually the right thing to do and what is wrong in this world is not clear. But the idea is there in these trials of war criminals that even though it may be one's duty on one's platform, or they're told it's your duty to perform activities according to the leader in the war situation, one would be wrong in doing so, and they were punished for that. Most of the Nazis, they were executed. So, if they hadn't followed the order, they probably would have been executed by their own people. But later on, they got executed by the enemy, as they considered. So such trials presuppose that there is a higher principle. That it may be considered the duty to fight for one's country, but there is a higher principle, which they call the self-manifest principles of humanitarianism. But Dharma works on the principle, Dharmang tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Dharma is that which is given by Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It means to act in this world, not neglecting the principles of this world, but at the same time understanding that this world is not all in all. We have to come to a higher platform of consciousness. Ultimately, Dharma means to act on a higher platform of consciousness. If one simply follows the rules of Dharma, blindly follows, that may be adharma. The example is given by Lord Krishna himself in Mahabharata, when he told the story of a Brahmana who had taken a vow never to tell an untruth, which is a good vow. Brahman is supposed to be truthful, or actually everyone is supposed to be truthful. But he was living at the edge of a village, which is surrounded by forest, and one day he was standing outside his house when he saw a man running in fear. And he said, Tell me, where can I hide? Robbers are chasing me. I'm a merchant, I'm carrying gold, and they want to rob me, so where can I hide? So the Brahmana pointed, you hide in the woods there. Then a few minutes later, a gang of robbers came up and said, did you see one man? We were chasing him, we want to rob him. Did you see where he went? He said, yes. Where did he go? He went over there in those woods. So they went there, found him and killed him and took the money. So the Brahmana didn't tell a lie, but because of not telling a lie in that situation, he went to hell at the time of death. Because there are two conflicting dharmas here. One is, one should not tell a lie, actually not conflicting, but apparently conflicting. That one should not tell a lie, but there's a higher principle that to protect a person, one can even tell a lie. So what in one situation is dharma, maybe in another situation adharma. He thought it's very good not to tell a lie, I should never tell a lie. But he went to hell by not telling a lie. In that situation, if he had told a lie, he would have got punya for doing so. But he thought, no, it's impious. I've made a vow, I have to follow the vow. So, what is considered good in one situation is bad in another. Prabhupada gave the example that a man, he's a soldier, in the fighting in the war, if he kills many of the enemy, he gets a medal for doing so. But if he comes home and kills one person, he's tried as a criminal. So what is praiseworthy in one situation is blamable in another. The fireman who is coming to save the people in the burning house, he smashes down the door, breaks the windows. If he does that in a burning fire to save people, he's praised. But if he does so in ordinary circumstances, he just walks into someone's house and breaks down the door, smashes the windows, he'll be tried as a criminal. So it requires... It doesn't work. All right. So it requires understanding of the higher principles of dharma, not just the words of Shastra, but one has to understand the higher principles. So Arjuna is in this situation now that he's bewildered to fight or not to fight, because it appears to be a conflicting situation. If he fights, he does his duty as a Kshatriya, and he, as a brother of Yudhishthira, he performs his duty. But at the same time, he has to attack his gurus, which is against the principles of religion. And so many reasons Arjuna gave for not fighting. That how can you fight with his gurus, his family members, dear ones? Women will be left unprotected, and then there will be bad population produced. So many reasons Arjuna gave for not fighting. It was Jai Shri Shri Kishore Kishore. So we've heard the term coined by Stephen Covey, win-win. But Arjuna saw a lose-lose situation. Whatever he did, it seemed there's nothing good to come out of it. So Arjuna proposed, let me get out of here. The best thing I can do is just leave this situation, because I can't do any good here. So let me leave. And then he became interested in renunciation. Arjuna, seeing the difficult situation, thought that, well, this material world is so difficult, better to renounce it. But Krishna says here that who is the real sannyasi? Who is the real renouncer? He says it's not one who gives up fire. Now, we may not understand this, what Krishna means. naniragnir, not one who is without fire. What does that mean? Well, in traditional karma sannyas, a sannyasi gives up all relationship with fire. This refers to, one thing is in every home of a brahmana, a fire is always burning. That may go on for generations. The fire is kept alive. And from that fire, that will go on, they'll keep some fire burning throughout the night. And in the morning, taking the light from that, they will again light the fire of yajna, the sacrifice. The brahmana has to perform according to the particular caste or the particular he's born into, or the particular family tradition he's following. He may perform yajna once a day, twice a day, or three times a day in his home. And he may perform outside also. He's yajnik. That's one name for a brahmana. Today even there are brahmanas with the family name yajnik. One who performs yajnas. And fire is also required for cooking, which is also a sacred activity. Actually, everything in the person who's following Vedic culture, especially the brahmana, but for everyone. That's why Arjuna, he was so interested to understand what is this Dharma. Everything is sacred. Everything he does. Because everything, Brahmarpanam Brahmave Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam Brahmaivatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Everything is considered spiritual. All one's activities are spiritual. All one's activities, if one is acting with consciousness of the Supreme Lord, then everything is spiritual. One's activities are all on the spiritual platform. Maybe you could just open the books and show, because people are going. So that everything, actually everything, even you see devotees, in the morning they're brushing their teeth. It is a spiritual activity. So, the manufacturers of toothpaste, they may, if they hear this, they may wish to advertise spiritual toothbrushing. Now what's spiritual about that? It's seems about as mundane as anything could be, brushing your teeth. But the point is that a devotee does everything for the sake of Krishna. So his activities of bodily maintenance are also for the sake of pleasing Krishna. He brushes his teeth, takes shower, and evacuates, and all these bodily activities only because the body is dedicated for the service of Krishna. So a devotee is interested to keep the body healthy because it's meant for serving Krishna. So even brushing the teeth, he's not doing thinking that how nice my teeth will be, and I will smile at a pretty lady and she will smile back at me. But he simply thinks that I have to maintain the body for the service of the Lord. So this is required. That's all. So in this way, a person in Krishna consciousness, or a person who's following Dharma, they act, everything they do is dedicated for the higher principle, for the service of the Supreme. Those who are in Varnashram, they may not have a very clear idea of what or who the Supreme is, but they understand that this life is not meant simply for mundane activities, but that everything is to be offered for the sake of the Supreme Lord. So, sannyasi, here Krishna is explaining, it's not simply a matter of renunciation. Sannyasi means one who has completely renounced. But it's not just a matter of giving up. It's giving up physically does not in and of itself constitute sannyas. Because one may give up endeavors within this material world because he finds them troublesome. So it's not that one's giving up out of a sense of renunciation, but that renunciation is renunciation in the mode of passion, because it appears that one is becoming renounced, but actually the so-called renunciation is because one finds it more comfortable. One finds it more pleasing for one's own sense gratification to give up something. Just like you see someone may be managing a big business and he may give that up because it's true. Then he says, he gives it up because he wants to live more peacefully. It's not that he's giving it up because he's renounced from the idea of sense gratification, but he's just changed, or he's embracing another form of sense gratification. He's enjoying, while managing the business, he's enjoying the sense gratification of earning lots of money, being recognized in society as an important businessman. But after some time he may find this is tiresome, it's troublesome, it's too much stress, so then he may give it up. Not that he's become a great yogi, but he gives it up because he finds that I would like to just live very peacefully without so much stress. So his renunciation is not spiritually motivated, but it's motivated by the desire to live in a manner that he considers is more pleasing to himself. That's all. That's why sometimes we see famous people, famous film star or sports player, they retire. Even they could go on earning more and more money and being famous, but they just retire. I've got enough money and I'll just live peacefully, and they withdraw. So the sports player who retires prematurely, it's not necessarily that or retires. If he could go on playing and earning lots of money and being famous, but he desires to withdraw just because he thinks that I've had enough now, I want a more peaceful life. So that is not spiritual, it's material. And Arjuna's proposal is something like that. Arjuna is confused as to the nature of renunciation. He's thinking that I shall just give everything up, and that in itself is spiritual. Just not to be desiring this, we shall dominate, we shall enjoy the kingdom. So to give up that desire, or to not be possessed of that desire, is good. But if one desires not to enjoy the kingdom because he finds it troublesome to do so, then that is not good. It's just another. In other words, one is not actually putting one's duty first, but one is considering what is better for my own comfort, mental comfort. So Krishna is discussing all these subtle points. It's not simply by giving up fire. Giving up fire means that is symbolic of sannyasa. The householder, he has to maintain the fire, but a sannyasi has no connection with fire. He doesn't cook for himself. He doesn't perform fire sacrifices. Fire sacrifices are generally conducted for the sake of invoking auspiciousness. But a sannyasi is automatically auspicious by his renunciation. And he's not trying to invoke auspiciousness for family comfort. So he gives up connection with fire. Of course, the sannyasi may cook for Krishna, or he may offer arati to Krishna, including the lamp, the pancha pradeep. But a sannyasi doesn't perform fire sacrifice to invoke auspiciousness or prosperity, nor does he cook for himself. So this is the life of a sannyasi. But Krishna is saying here, what is the real meaning of a sannyasi? The real meaning of a sannyasi, Krishna says, is one who performs his duty and who is unattached. So he's already given the example of Janak Maharaj, who is living as a householder, and not just a householder, but a king. So he was living amidst much comfort, but he was unattached. He was unattached, and he performed his duty as a king just because it required to be performed, and he was not doing that for his own sense gratification, although it may appear that he was doing so, because as a king, he was obliged to live in a palace, in comfort, with servants all around him. But actually, he is the famous example of one who is not attached. Hare Krishna. So this is why one who is in Krishna consciousness, even if a householder, one who's actually in Krishna consciousness, and who's actually dedicating all his activities to the service of Krishna, even as a householder, he's actually a sannyasi more than a so-called sannyasi who renounces everything without understanding its relationship with Krishna. This is described by Srila Rupa Goswami in two very famous verses. Prapancha katya buddhya hari sambandhu vastani mumukshabi parityago falgu vairagya uchate. Vairagyam falgu uchate. That one who appears to be very renounced, he gives up home, comfort, and he only has stick and a kamandalu, water pot, maybe a begging bowl. Very few possessions, just cloth to cover the body like this. Very renounced. But if one renounces everything without understanding that everything in the world is meant for the service of Krishna, then that is called Falgu Vairagya, or not very meaningful. The example is there, the Falgu Nadi. There is one river in Gaya, in the state of Bihar, which is said that you can't really see the water. But if it's just dry, it looks like there's no water. But if you just poke in the mud or in the sand, a little bit underneath, the water is flowing. The water flows just under the surface. So it's said that those who renounce everything of this world without seeing its connection with Krishna, their renunciation is like that. It looks like there's nothing there, there's no desire there. But if you just go a little bit underneath, you'll find that actually so many desires are there, because they haven't understood that everything is meant for the service of Krishna. On the other hand, anasaktasya vishayan anasaktasya vishayan yataham upayanjitaha nibandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchyate. That one who understands that everything is Krishna's and therefore everything should be used in the service of Krishna, and who acts in that way. He may use everything of this world, but is not attached to it. That is Yukta Vairagya. It's called Yukta Vairagya, or Yukta means using everything and at the same time being renounced. So, one who's a real sannyasi is not one, we've heard the example, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that Prabhupada said this. Anyway, even if it's not exactly true, the example is appropriate. That Prabhupada had said that some sannyasis, if you bring them money, they'll say, no, I cannot touch it. In Thailand, even today, the monks, the rule is they should not touch money. They eat meat, but they're not allowed to touch money. Even they eat meat, the idea is that they have to, whatever food they get by begging. So if somebody gives them meat, they should be unattached. That's the idea. So whatever you're given, you should eat it. So what if someone chops off their hand and puts it? They should eat that too. If they put stew, should they eat that? According to the theory, they should do. Anyway, Prabhupada, apparently he was said that, well, some sannyasis, they'll say, no, I cannot touch money. But Prabhupada said, yes, give more. Give more. So people may think, well, what kind of sannyasi is this? Prabhupada himself, he wrote in his early Back to Godhead magazine, which he was publishing single-handedly, when he was living in Vrindavan, or actually he was living even more of the time in Delhi. He was officially living in Vrindavan, but he had his rooms also in Delhi, because he was going up and down. He was going to Delhi for publishing and distributing his Back to Godhead magazine. So he wrote in that magazine that some people are surprised, what is this Bhaktivedanta Swami doing? That he left home to become a sadhu and went to Vrindavan. He left his business, but he's still doing business. He goes up and down to Delhi. He spends so much time in Delhi, and he's printing the magazine. He's bargaining with the printer over the price of paper, selling the magazine. He seems to become a spiritual businessman. He can't give up this business. He's so addicted to doing business that even after giving up everything to leave home and come to Vrindavan, he's still doing business. But Prabhupada said, no, this is not material, this is not mundane. This activity is meant for the service of Krishna, and therefore it is fully spiritual. This is more spiritual because it's preaching Krishna consciousness. Because the motive is to please Krishna, it is even better than just sitting in Vrindavan and doing bhajan. It's better. How is that better? That should be the best thing, isn't it? To sit in Vrindavan and do bhajan. But to fulfill the desire of the Lord by preaching, one may involve in so many material activities, apparently material, but they're not material, they're spiritualized by the motivation. And actually in Dharma, to come back to Dharma, what is the deciding factor? Why is the Brahmin wrong by not telling a lie when the man became killed by doing so? It's Arjuna is saying we should not fight, we should not kill people, and we should not kill our elders, we should not kill our family members. So Arjuna was protesting that my motive is very good, but Krishna detected that, well, you're just doing it out of your idea of how you will be comfortable. So motive, what is the motive? That is the deciding factor on whether something is proper or not. Just that same example, so many examples. The man who killed so many soldiers in the war, because his motive is to serve the country, he's given a medal. But if he comes home and kills one man, because his motive is not to serve the country, but to unnecessarily cause harm, then he becomes a criminal by doing so. So, if the motive is to please Krishna, then involvement with management, money, buildings, legal matters, that is, if the motive is only to please Krishna, that is pure devotional service. But one may be even sitting in Vrindavan and performing bhajan, and even if one's aim is that by doing so I will go to Krishna, that is not as glorious as one who lives in this world and works in this world and performs so many activities with the idea that I shall please Krishna by doing so, by bringing others to Krishna. Because the idea I shall go to Krishna, which is good, but it's only centered, it's still consideration of one's own self-interest. That it's only me. But then, what does Krishna want? What I want to go to Krishna. It's very good. That's a lot better than wanting to be a materialist or an impersonalist. But still, it's not as good as one who thinks, what does Krishna want from me? If I perform bhajan and go to Krishna, well, that's good. But then, if by my activities so many others may come to Krishna consciousness, that is more pleasing to Krishna. So, the activities of preaching Krishna consciousness, they necessarily involve money, management, buildings, legal matters. And it may appear that a person who is engaged in such activities is rather mundane. He's not as spiritual as one who is sitting and just studying books, and chanting. But that may or may not be. If the motive is to please Krishna, then one who is performing all these activities can be just as, if not more pleasing to Krishna than one who gives up all these activities with the idea that I shall be very pure. So what does pure mean? We've so many times heard the term pure devotional service. Prabhupada, of course not only Prabhupada, it's Shuddha Bhakti. That term is there. But that means to act without any personal desire, to act only for Krishna's pleasure. So it's not necessarily true, the stereotype of a sadhu, one who is always hearing and chanting about Krishna and they don't get involved in other things. Of course, that's very good. We want such sadhus. Such sadhus are rare and they're a great boon for the world. But as Prabhupada, in a letter writing to one sannyasi, said that sannyas means to do as I am doing. That not only hearing and chanting and all these things, but sometimes giving the class, sometimes seeing to the accounts, sometimes cooking, sometimes worshipping the deity, to do the needful. This is another phrase Prabhupada used to use a lot. Do the needful. Do whatever is required for serving Krishna. That if we think that, well, I'm not going to take out the garbage because, someone else can. I'm a sannyasi. Of course, in our ISKCON as it's expanded now, generally, or hardly ever, the sannyasis take out the garbage because there is manpower to do that. And there is division of service within the service to Krishna. But the point is that if necessary, one should be prepared to do so. Prabhupada did. When he came to America to preach Krishna consciousness in that situation where no one understood anything about it, or not only not understood, but they didn't understand anything about the culture of how we should serve sadhus, or not even we're not talking about Vedic culture, but even like ordinary human culture, where Prabhupada from the external point of view was an old man, and he was working so hard to cook everything. He would serve all the young people, and then they would say, well, thanks a lot, Swamiji, and go away and leave him to clean up everything. So they didn't even have the basic, we're not talking about high Vedic culture, but even the basic human sense, that here's an elderly person, and he's working so hard to prepare all this, let's help him. Well, gradually some did start to help him, and in this way, by doing so, by serving Prabhupada, and in this way pleasing him and taking him as association, they became purified and they became devotees. But Prabhupada showed the example that Prabhupada wasn't so much so-called detached that he was just so absorbed in in chanting about Krishna that he would neglect other things. This is another misunderstanding of spiritual life, that one is so spiritual that he neglects other things. But we see that Prabhupada was very, very much concerned, just like he was very much concerned with the workings of his movement. In Vrindavan, he was noticing how stealing was going on. He wanted to stop the stealing. Then he would call the temple president and say, how much are you spending for bhoga? And Prabhupada would say, no, you're spending too much, cut it down. He'd say, how much are you spending? This much for rice. Prabhupada said, no, you shouldn't spend so much for rice. You spend less. He would cut it all down. He's very strict. He was the bell. The bell should be rung every hour. Just like there's a church bell here, isn't there? That's rung on the hour. So Prabhupada, he was insistent that must be rung. That means that if the bell is not being rung throughout the night, that means the watchman is sleeping. He's not doing his job. Of course, in India, every watchman sleeps throughout the night. When you pay a watchman, you pay someone to sleep, practically. We don't find. So, but Prabhupada, he didn't want that. He's being paid, so he should ring the bell. He was insistent, and he would press the managers so hard. Why is that bell not ringing? This means that your management is not proper. So Prabhupada was so insistent on every detail of the management because everything should be done properly for Krishna. He wasn't so detached that he was just floating in ecstasy, Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, and meantime people are stealing things, nothing's going on properly. Now, of course, it shouldn't have to be that a sannyasi is involved in all these details. But the point is that there should be other devotees should take up the responsibility, and sannyasis should be free to be absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna and inspiring others to do so. But the point is that if there's no one else to do it, a sannyasi should be prepared to do so. That is, actual sannyas doesn't mean to renounce service to Krishna. He should be prepared to oversee all aspects of service. You renounce everything, but don't renounce service also. I'm so renounced that I renounce serving Krishna. Well, that's not renunciation. That's the renunciation of a Mayavadi. That he's renounced everything except begging for chapatis. But that's not proper renunciation. So Krishna is teaching Arjuna what is the actual meaning of sannyas. There's the external formality of that. Of course, the formality also, if it's understood properly, that helps the inner sense of sannyas. That's why you may say, well, if sannyas just means dedicating everything to Krishna, then every householder can be a sannyasi, and what's the need to take sannyas? But that external formality, however, also, it helps to put one in a position where one can be renounced, and it helps to bolster the sense of renunciation. Formally accepting sannyas doesn't in and of itself constitute becoming a sannyasi, although it's hoped that it will be. But if one doesn't internally accept sannyas, if one only externally takes a stick, but in the heart there's not the sense of full dedication to Krishna, then that's not actual sannyas. Whereas someone who, even if they don't formally accept sannyas, but they're actually dedicating everything to Krishna, they're really a sannyasi. However, the formal acceptance of sannyas is supposed to help that person to be an actual sannyasi. Because if one is in family life, one is surrounded by all the things and all the opportunities that people generally become attached to. Putra dara grihadishu. This is mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that renunciation, one should be renounced from sons, wife, home, and all the rest. So if one is living in the middle of that, it's difficult to be renounced from it. One who is renounced from it, living in the midst of it, is certainly a sannyasi. But it's easier to be renounced if one is physically cut off from that. So even many great devotees, they formally accept sannyas, at least to show the example to others. Prabhupada, he was in householder life, but he accepted sannyas and formally, and by doing so, even though in family life his main interest was preaching, but he was also, there were so many family duties he had to perform, which took up so much time and energy. And when he took sannyas, he had no more family duty to perform. So that facilitated his preaching. And if one is a sannyasi, because the sannyas order commands respect, then others will be more prepared to hear what he has to say and more inclined to assist him in his mission of preaching. So one may formally accept sannyas to facilitate one's actual sense of renunciation. If one has no sense of renunciation and takes sannyas, then it's a farce and it's a disaster and it's hypocritical. But if one actually has that inclination, then accepting sannyas will be fruitful. But it may be even that one is inclined to take sannyas, but he may be instructed not to do so because he has to serve Krishna. He's required to serve Krishna in another capacity. We see the example of Maharaj Agnidra, not Agnidra, who was that? Priyavrata. That he was a brahmachari and he was inclined to remain a brahmachari. But he became under intense pressure from Lord Brahma himself. That no, you are required to manage the affairs of the universe, which requires that you have to be married. So he didn't want to. He was inclined to be renounced, but because for the matter of his service, he required to accept a role which would be better discharged from the Grihastha ashram. Therefore, he had to accept that. He didn't want to, but then he said, all right, it's the order of the superiors. Whatever is required, I'll do so. There was also approximately 1976, the temple president in Vrindavan was a brahmachari. But he was feeling, at ISKCON Vrindavan, but he was feeling that this service, I have to deal with so many worldly matters that I don't feel I can remain as a brahmachari. I feel inclined, I have to enter Grihastha life. Either I have to be an honest devotee and discharge my duties properly, either I have to leave this service to remain a brahmachari, or I have to get married. So I became under a lot of pressure from different sannyasis. That no, you should remain a brahmachari, and even then anyway you leave this service and remain brahmachari better. But Prabhupada, when this matter came to Prabhupada, he said, no, he's managing the temple very well. Better let him be a grihastha and continue in the service. Continuing the service is more important than his ashram, in this case. So what is Dharma there? It's very subtle to understand. One who understands what is the desire of Krishna, he can properly guide us. How each individual can act in the manner that he is required to do so, that is best suited for him. How he can best serve Krishna. That's why even though in Shastra there's so much information on how to act, still one requires a guru. It's not simply by reading books that one can ascertain what is best even for oneself. Even Arjuna, before he heard Bhagavad Gita, it wasn't that he was a fool. When Krishna said to him, well, Krishna called him a fool, but Krishna called him a fool, but actually he was far more wise than all of us. Well, at least far more wise than the average person. But when Krishna told him, Dehino svinyata dehe kaumarang yovanam jara tata dehantara praptya dhiras tatra namuhyati, that the body is changing from boyhood to youth to old age, but the soul, the possessor of the body, does not change. And one who is undisturbed, he remains undisturbed despite the final change called death, in which we go into another body. But it wasn't that this was news. It wasn't that Arjuna had never heard of this before. He knew that, but Krishna discussed these subjects and clarified their import to Arjuna. So Arjuna knew these things, but how the intricacies of this, and how that was to be applied in his particular situation, for that he required to consult Krishna. We may think, well, I know what's better for me, but it may not necessarily be true. Another example, one time a devotee approached Prabhupada, Prabhupada, can I take sannyas? Prabhupada said, no, get married. So, because Prabhupada could see, this is better for you. This is required for you. So I may think, he wants to take sannyas, that's good. He wants to be renounced and serve Krishna. Sannyas means fully serving Krishna. Grihastha life means there's so many material considerations and obligations and impediments. So why didn't Prabhupada agree to? No, he said, no, you should get married. Does that mean that Prabhupada was trying to obstruct his spiritual life? No, but he saw this person is not fit for this ashram. It's better for him to serve Krishna in Grihastha ashram. That will be better for him. So, like this Brahmana who took the vow not to tell a lie, but he didn't understand the import of Shastra or Dharma. So he thought he was being very good by not lying, but actually he became sinful by, in that particular circumstance, not lying. So, Krishna is explaining here. It seems to, it's a radical definition of sannyas, you may say. That one who leaves everything is not a sannyasi. Here Krishna says, na niragniya, na chakriya. One who leaves all family responsibilities and doesn't perform any work is not a sannyasi, Krishna says. But one who, he doesn't specifically state here, but it's implied, that one who even in family life works according to his obligations without being attached, he is actually a sannyasi. More than one who gives that up simply because it's troublesome. So these are all points to be considered. Hare Krishna. Any question about this? Yeah. Do we have a cordless mic? All right, so please speak loudly.
Okay, Maharaj, thank you for your very nice class. I have a question about how do you understand balancing different services to different obligations you may have? Like, for example, sometimes I've seen the case where somebody say, I can't chant my rounds right now because I have to do this service. And then some instances they may not chant the rounds at all on the day because it's a type of service they have. So how do you balance?
What is the balance between service and sadhana? Although service is also part of the sadhana, but the chanting the rounds, what is the balance? Well, in a preaching movement, the balance will never, it'll never be so peaceful that there's just, like this, everything is perfectly balanced. Preaching movement means it's always intense. So we require time for sadhana and quality sadhana, but we also require to perform so many activities for bringing others to Krishna consciousness. So what is the balance? Well, everyone has to find that themselves. Not exactly themselves, that means in consultation with temple authorities, that what is required for one's own spiritual advancement. And basically Prabhupada has given that program. We should have morning and evening programs and spend the rest of the time in performing activities either inside the temple, like cleaning, maintenance, pujari service, cooking, or going outside for preaching, or preaching inside, or whatever. And Prabhupada's answer, just like when Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Prabhupada told him that you should read 2 hours, you should read my books minimum 2 hours every day. And he said, well, Prabhupada, I'm reading 1 hour every day. I can't remember exactly, but this is the gist of it. He said, I'm reading 1 hour every day, but I have so much service, I'm only sleeping 4 hours a day. So Prabhupada said, then you sleep 3 hours, but you read more. So the balance is push, push, push. That seems, there's no comfortable life, it's in Krishna consciousness. Yesterday, we were staying in the house of one very nice couple, Columbus devotees. And during the lecture in the evening, in the temple, I saw the lady whose house we were staying in. It's obvious she was very tired. So I said to her, "Thank you very much for being so tired, because I can understand that you've been working very hard, cooking, cleaning. So it's better to be tired physically and fully engaged spiritually than to be very comfortable and very healthy and not doing very much in Krishna's service." So we don't deliberately try to make the body uncomfortable, or we don't deliberately neglect our health, but actually Prabhupada even said that once. He said a devotee neglects his health. Now you see that Prabhupada himself, he took precautions for his health. He took massage for 2 hours a day. And with his diet, he was quite strict and this and that. But at the same time, his general mode of life wasn't at all conducive for good health. At the age of over 70, constantly traveling. For his health, it would have been better not to do so. So he pushed himself, he pushed his body. Of course, we should understand the body of a pure devotee is fully transcendental, but at least in his showing the example of an acharya, one who preaches by his example, he pushed himself physically and did what he could to keep the health maintained while he did so, but he didn't give up his core activity of traveling and preaching, because that was required for the service of Krishna. But then he also, like this, he had massage. He said 3 things are keeping my body, keeping me alive, he said. One is my massage, one is the diet, and one is the Ayurvedic medicine he would take regularly. So the balance looks pretty unbalanced to those who are into, optimum health and all this kind of thing. A devotee doesn't aim for that. A devotee pushes himself to the max, actually, and more. But at the same time, adopt some sensible measures. Just like if you find that, for instance, if you find that by taking a certain kind of food, that it gives you certain physical problems, then it would be wise not to take that. I'm allergic to certain things, which I don't take, because why should the body unnecessarily become disturbed when I can avoid that by not eating it? So, at the same time, devotees are not health fanatics. Like the average American seems to be a health fanatic. They're doing so many different exercises and so many different... Well, not everyone. There's still plenty of people who smoke and eat red meat, which everyone knows is bad for health. But a devotee, he may take some medicine and this and that, but it doesn't become so... Now, when you're talking about balance of service and sadhana, I'm going off a little bit on the side here. But the point is that, we do push ourselves. It's not an easygoing life. We push ourselves. There's no perfect balance. Better that we wear out these bodies and go back to Godhead than live very comfortably. Oh, so many questions. Well, I saw Sarvabhauma's hand first. And he's the most...
Like you have a complaint. It's been an entire year. It's been 1 whole year since you've been here. So that's my complaint. But my question is, in the year that we've been going, we've been putting a lot of emphasis on the idea that, we're not vigilant enough. We're ghosting.
You have been.
It sounds to me, based on what I've been hearing you say, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you were saying that, our position is not vigilant enough, it's ghosting. It sounded like that was one of the points you were off.
Yeah, we're not Bhajanandis, we're Goshtianandis. That's the role given to us by our acharyas, yeah.
Excuse me. In the year that you've been gone, there's no evidence that we've been able to convince people to enter into this particular temple. We haven't increased any membership. So I'm wondering, is there some needful thing that I can maybe do to make a difference in that regard?
How can we make the Goshtianandi mission of ISKCON Chicago manifest? Well, in the Vyasa Puja offering I saw from ISKCON Chicago, it looked like everything was on the up and up. There was the names of Sunil Madhav and all different devotees and all doing. Jitendriya Prabhu was mentioned, Gaur Kishore, back to Josh. They mentioned how all the elements are in place for expansion. So someone sees that there's some preaching going on, and it may not happen immediately, but I can't say, it's very difficult for me to say coming in one day that this is wrong, this is right, but at least who wrote that Vyasa Puja offering? Yourself! That's why your name wasn't in there. So all the elements are there. So let's pray to Krishna and increase. Try and increase. There's definitely whatever, from what I can see, there's very good scope for preaching Krishna consciousness everywhere, all over the world. Very good scope. People are becoming Krishna conscious more and more. And you have plenty of programs here, I'm seeing you have. They have programs in different parts of the city going on. So, Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Devakinanda, book distributor, he just wrote something. And from what he can see, America's ready for another wave of Krishna consciousness. Said after 9/11, it's conscious of people have changed. He was writing how in New Mexico, he was saying regularly on college campuses, he goes and people say, well, I don't have money, I'll come back. And they do. They come back for books. And he was saying in New Mexico, he just put a book table and people were actually lining up to get books. They stood in a line at the university. So there are signs that America's ready. But America's ready, but that we have to give Krishna consciousness. And now I'm changing the subject a bit, but this may be controversial to say so, but there's a lot of garbage being propagated in the name of Krishna consciousness these days. And then, there are people who are saying, there are so many things that, you don't have to follow 4 regulated principles, and you don't have to take food offered to, you don't have to do this, and then so many. They'll discourage. Why are you going and distributing books? So, let's see what Prabhupada wanted and follow that. And this negative propaganda, we don't want that. That won't help anything. The fire of material life is, Prabhupada came and he saw the fire of material life is burning. So he combated that by making a great movement, distributing lots of books, having lots of Harinams. So the fire is still burning. the fire of material life has not been extinguished. So the need to go on preaching Krishna consciousness is just as strong as when Prabhupada came. So if I haven't been here for a year, it's not that I've been, sitting in a field somewhere chanting rounds all day long, but I've been trying to be engaged as a Goshtiananda preacher. But it's a big world and there are many places to go. Hare Krishna. Please speak loudly because I have a mic and you don't.
It seems to be what the answer to the question of balance and what to do with how to serve Krishna, do all these wonderful activities that have given us to do in a systematic, ongoing way, striving to get to Krishna consciousness. It seems what I've heard, that the balance is to have Krishna in our the intention to love Krishna in our hearts when we serve, whatever it is that we're doing, as long as it is hopefully not violating the obvious principles.
Yeah, if we do everything for Krishna, then the balance is, whatever we do is perfect. But the problem is that we don't have that fully developed love, and then many times we find that if we're going on working in service to Krishna, but without sufficient quality hearing and chanting, we forget that why we're doing it. And we're just saying, why am I working so hard? I could be earning money. It's required for neophytes like ourselves to engage in sufficient quality hearing and chanting. But at the same time, the fire of material life is burning and we have so many things to do to push on the movement. So there's always a dichotomy there. Yeah.
In essence, I was cultivating this inward chanting. So as even trying to get or even as speaking words, underneath those words in my mind, I was chanting. And what I was doing, instead of just maybe a big piece, what I was doing with my hands, whatever it was, is the same as chanting music service. So my trying to maintain this inner, it's almost a double, the inner awareness of Krishna chanting the silence, the period of the inner.
That's very nice. For those of us who are less advanced, we also require some regular sadhana.
That's the training, but to cultivate that inner, it seems to be very blessed.
Certainly you're blessed. Dev. People ask your name, you can say Dev. American name. Spiritual name, yeah.
The example of the German Nazi, wherein he got the orders from the authorities to kill, and because he didn't use his proper rationale
to tell them no.
Was incorrect, and he acted upon it without proper contemplation. In the same way, sometimes people who are in authority pass resolutions or make decisions without consensus of the party involved, and sometimes and people are forced to follow authority just because that's a decision being made.
Yeah, that's also within our spiritual society. You mean sometimes leaders it's a principle that we should follow authority, but if the authority gives instructions which are not good, then what to do? Well, there was an extreme example of this, approximately 1974, where the GBC in one temple in America, his wife was offering chicken to the deities. And the devotees, they understood something was wrong, but at the same time they thought, well, we can't go against the GBC. Those were different days. Nowadays, even if the GBC does something right, people don't want to follow. But in those days, people had such respect for the GBC that even such a clear violation of what should be done, they had such respect, they thought, oh, we can't go against the GBC. But then when Prabhupada came, some of the devotees brought this to him. And Prabhupada said, well, for the junior devotees, it was right, they should just follow the authorities. But for the seniors, they should have said something. So they shouldn't have just gone along with it. So it may be different according to our status also. It becomes complex. That's why, that's why we have Mahabharata, and it gives us so, because there are the rules of Dharma, but how to apply them exactly. There's unlimited possible circumstances in this world. So one has to very deeply and finely understand the principles of Dharma to know how to act in it. Well, in most circumstances it's quite clear, but then in others, in certain circumstances, it can be unclear. There are common questions. People come to us and say that, look, the doctor says that if you don't abort this child, then the life of the mother is threatened. So people come and say, what should we do? Should we abort or not? And the common question is that the woman, she wants to follow Krishna consciousness, but the husband is forcing her to have sex every night. So what should she do? It's complex because there are different principles at work. If she says no to the husband, then he'll go and impregnate other women or divorce her. So if she says yes, then she can't follow the four regulated principles. So it becomes a difficult question. It's not an easy solution. So we're faced with this all the time. Hare Krishna. So I guess I'll finish. I'm very fortunate to have the darshan of Shri Shri Gaur Nitai, Shri Shri Kishore Kishori, Jagannath Subhadra Baladev. These deities are very dear to Prabhupada. So this is a great blessing for me to have their darshan and have all the devotees here. Hare Krishna.